Maybe you're thinking, I've never run ultramarathons, yet done them back to back. Why would I do that? That seems silly. I know. Okay, I know. But if you're somebody who's been in a very stressful job for the last 20 years and not had much of a break, and you haven't taken a sabbatical for a year, you haven't taken time away, you haven't given yourself a leave of absence, and you've been just in and out and doing the things, and you're feeling the stress in your body, it's the same thing. I want to tell you this. I mean, maybe not physically necessarily with like your muscle tissue breaking down that quickly, but it's like it happens in slower motion. Stress on the body is stress on the body. Hey there, welcome to the Female Health Solution podcast, where we discuss women's health, hormones, and everything else in between. Join me as we dive into the tools that you need to live your healthiest life. My husband almost died. Something that was totally preventable. I'm going to go into it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to share all the things that I have not really shared before about this openly and dive in. So, I'm Dr. Beth Westy. Welcome to the Female Health Solution podcast. Some of the things that I share in this podcast are answering questions that people have, talking about your health and hormones, really describing how your human physiology works. And then I also share about myself. This is really the platform that I use to tell my stories. I've talked about my personal history, my health history, my experience with mold and getting bit by a brown recluse spider, or how I set boundaries in my life with people and my, things, right? So this is how I go through and talk about all these things. So as I'm recording this is December right now, and I'm going to talk about what just happened about 6 months ago, in July, with my husband. Now, for context and background on everything, and as I put a really fun lip gloss on, that tastes really good and smells really good. For context here, my husband, we're the same age, so we're both in our mid-40s now. He had worked for almost 20 years doing masonry, so being a brick mason. And then he had retired about 2 years prior and was being a stay-at-home dad, living his best life, and then got really into running in ultramarathons. Part of this that I want to talk about here is that his running became an obsession and started to become, instead of just like, oh, this is a healthy way to channel my energy and spend my time and, go for runs with my friends, and oh, my friends are going to run this marathon. My friends are going to run this ultra. I'm going to pace my buddy for this big ultra. Cool. It became a big obsession and started to take over more and more. And when I say take over, it was like nothing else existed except for the running, until it literally almost killed him. But he was in, at that point, like the best shape of his life. Prime shape. He had been, he started running literally like 2 years earlier. He'd only been running 2 years. Now, he was a distance athlete for a long time, growing up and in high school and in college and then beyond, right? Distance running, all that stuff. Like he could literally, now my husband, he's an amazing athlete. He's one of those guys that he could literally just get up one day, zero training, and run a 10-mile. He's done that before. He's like run 5Ks, 10Ks, and won on zero training pretty much. Right? I'm like barely doing this justice, but to say like, oh yeah, he ran a marathon. It's not just that he ran a marathon. He was running ultramarathons. He had run 60Ks, 50Ks, 100Ks, 50 miles, 100-mile races. Being able to do that, finish, recover, all that stuff. And there was a big piece of this that I was actually helping him with his nutrition, with his training nutrition, with his race nutrition, physically working on his body. I mean, I became a massage therapist 21 years ago. Right. So the body work and stuff that I do on him, the acupuncture, all that stuff, adjusting him, all those things, that's my skill set. So physically working on his body to keep him going. and to keep training and to keep running. Great. So there's part of this where I feel really, really frustrated that he got to a point where he overdid it so much and did not listen to me and put himself in a really scary situation, and then has taken him a long time to recover. I have my own feelings about that, but I'm just going to share some of the stuff about just purely what happened. So he'd been running, he had done marathons, things like that. He had done a marathon. No, it was an ultra, whatever. It was a really big race. This was last year, almost a year ago now. It was over right around New Year's, and it was in Wisconsin. It's supposed to be a snow race, but there wasn't snow last year. So instead of pulling a sled with all of his gear in it and stuff, he had a backpack on and stuff, but he had been sick. And I made him stop after 30 miles or something, because I was like, this is ridiculous. And he was over the halfway point, and he was like, he would have won that race if he would have kept going, but he was sick and he was coughing and he looked like crap. And I literally stood there on the trail and I was like, no, get in the car. I'm so sorry, but get in the car. You're like, what is going on? And he cried in the car because of this. I made him stop. And I was like, you're not well enough. You keep coughing. You don't this is not okay to do this to your body. He recovered. He did another marathon that spring. He then did some ultras in the spring and early summer. And then he had signed up for an ultramarathon that he ran with a friend. And this was right after the 4th of July. So that first weekend in July, so this is 6 months ago. It was really, really hot and humid. He ran it with a friend. He got overheated right before the end. I could see him. I was standing at the finish line. He was, 500 feet away or something. He was bent over, heaving. It took him 10 minutes then to make it that last distance, because it was so hot, right? And he then came back from that. He was like, oh, I'm okay. All right. He had one day at home, and then the day after that, he and our son went to the Boundary Waters for a week. They were gone for the whole week in the Boundary Waters, which is canoeing, camping, hiking, fishing, all the stuff. Fun. That is not the prime environment to rest and refuel for another trail marathon. So he was gone for the week. He was home for one day, and then he went to go run another trail marathon up in Duluth the next day, which at night before he left, he was like, the night before he left, he was like, I kind of have a headache. And I was like, don't go. Like, this is a terrible idea. Don't do it. No, I'll be fine. He was not fine, right? He went and spent the night up there in Duluth because they start really early in the morning, and it was a trail marathon, so there's not a lot of stopping points, all this stuff. It took him a really long time to finish. He was really wiped out. He said it was really hard to finish, and I'm like, right, duh. He drove home then, and we live in the Twin City area, so it took 2.5 hours to drive home. So he was gone all day and exhausted coming back. He rested and recovered the next day on Sunday, and then Monday morning he woke up and threw up. And I was like, something's really wrong, because he said he still had a headache. He still had all this other stuff. I was like, nope, something's really wrong. Right now, go get your labs done. I ordered a lab draw for him. He went and got his blood drawn. And I got some of the results right away. His inflammation levels were off the charts. His CK levels were off the charts. So creatinine kinase. There was protein in his urine. His body was breaking down. I'm telling you the order of story. I want to make sure I do the chronological part to how he got there. How did his body start to break down? We're looking at rhabdomyolysis. We're looking at his system started dumping everything. His body shut down. Muscle tissue breaking down, inflammatory markers off the charts. He was in so much physical pain. He was exhausted, and yet he couldn't eat. His stomach was upset. If he tried to eat too much, he would vomit. He couldn't eat a lot of solid food. I was drawing labs on him. We started getting him IV therapy. So drip IV. He went there several times a week, and it took him 2 months to be able to start to resemble his old self. So for that whole time, he was literally unable to care for himself or do anything. Meaning he could not stand up in the kitchen long enough to make food. He lost 20 pounds in the first 3 weeks. Muscle, right? His like he talked about trying to swallow and like his throat couldn't swallow as well. Like the food go down. And I'm like, yeah, because it's all smooth muscle. All of your muscles are going. All of your muscles are depleting. That means all of the muscle in your body, not just your skeletal muscle, like your arms and your legs and stuff like that, but the smooth muscle, the muscles that are activated when you swallow. So you cannot take big bites. You cannot swallow too quickly. So I would have to make him smaller foods, soft foods, like toddler foods, make sure things were cut up. And at this point then in our lives, it was very busy, very stressful. Our son was going to be leaving for college at the end of August. Our second child, our daughter, our first daughter, she was working on getting her driver's license. So I had to take over and go into extreme mom mode for everybody. Literally care for and keep my husband alive. And then keep, kids going to camps and doing all the things in the summer and make sure my daughter got all of her driving hours in and helping my son get ready for college and all of this stuff. And at the same time, literally round the clock caring for my husband, meaning making sure he could eat enough. He had a hard time finishing a meal. He sometimes would wake up in the middle of the night hungry, and I would have to make him a shake in the middle of the night. He literally couldn't eat enough to stop the muscle damage and then the amount of pain that he was in all the time too. And his body was trying to flush out all of the inflammatory things that were going on, all the other toxic repercussions from his body dumping everything. Like his cholesterol went crazy, all this stuff. And he would sweat all the time at night. He couldn't sleep for very many hours at a time because he'd be in so much pain. Different parts of his body hurt really, really bad. So for the first 2-3 weeks, it was something new all the time. It was something new every day that would hurt, that would bother him, some new symptom, some new thing or whatever. I was monitoring him daily, taking his temperature, taking his blood pressure, all this other stuff, monitoring his weight, monitoring what he was eating and drinking and everything else. And I was pumping him full of so much stuff, monitoring his iron levels, getting labs drawn on him every week. And I managed to keep him alive, and he didn't want to go into the hospital. And I was like, okay, because he was worried he wouldn't come out. But that was, I've never been at a point in my life before with this man, because he is a bear of a man. Like he's a mountain man. And I've never been scared that something bad was going to happen to him until that moment. And we've been together for 23 years, a really long, over half our lives. And there were a couple of moments where I was like, oh my God, like he might have damaged himself permanently. Like, this is so bad. I don't know if he can come back. The things that are in his, urine tests, in his blood tests, all these other things, it's bad. His body is fighting to stay alive right now. It's, and that type of thing, from pushing it too much, from pushing your body too hard and not getting enough fuel and not recovering enough. This is what the human body does to try and survive. He took it over the edge. He went too far. So not only was I trying to keep everybody else going, everything else going in the household, and then care for him around the clock in between me working and doing things and all that. I was scared. There were points where I was really scared. And so it took him a while to really kind of come back. So when we took our son to college, I almost didn't know if he was going to come with. And we drove, because it's about 7 hours away from where we're at. And we drove, but he couldn't carry any of the boxes up to his dorm room. He couldn't walk the 3 flights of stairs in the dorm room to get there. You just take the elevator, stuff like that. Now he's come around and gotten better, but it's even still at Thanksgiving, which was, as I'm recording this, Thanksgiving was last week. My husband dished up his food, sat down, ate as much as he could. And then he was done, and he has to eat really slowly and take his time and everything else. Normally he would like just house food, just horse it down. That doesn't happen anymore. He can't. He physically can't do it. So he sat and ate slowly, and everybody else was done eating, and he still had quite a bit of food on his plate. And my sister looks at him and is like, "You're not done?" And then she looked at me. I was like, "This is how he is still." Normally that food would have been gone and he would have been up there for seconds or even thirds by now, but he can't do it. It's part of his digestive process, some of that stuff. So as of right now, he is doing much better. He can do a lot of things. He still has a tendency to do too much and overdo it. And these are just regular daily activities for himself. He can go pheasant hunting, like with the dogs. But he doesn't go all day. He'll go for like 4 hours or 6 hours and then call it quits, versus he used to be hunting for 10, 12 hours a day and do that for multiple days in a row. And now he doesn't do that. He goes for one day for several hours, then takes a break, or doesn't go again until a day or two later. He just doesn't have the stamina that he used to. So, I mean, the most recent labs that I've drawn, because I still run labs on him, like everything is within normal limits. Everything looks fine. He is coming back around, but it's a long journey. And stuff like this, it can take time. And so I talked about this before, where my dad had, in a different episode where I shared where my dad had pneumonia really bad and was in the hospital for a month. And that was really bad. And I told my dad when he got out of the hospital to mark the calendar 1 year from that date, because he needed to be really serious and work on his health for the next year if he wanted to have a longevity. And it's the same thing for my husband. After he started getting better, so not even a year from when he got sick, a year from when he started getting better, which is 2 months after he got sick, before he started to resemble his own old self. He couldn't walk upstairs without holding, like, not just like his hand on the handrail, like gripping it and helping him up the stairs. Right? It was crazy. So, he's on the upswing, but I told him it's going to take a long time before you are back to your old self again. And I don't know if you did some permanent damage yet where it can impact you. Because when you talk about like having a really bad incident like that and having rhabdomyolysis and things like that, it's things like kidney damage and other organ damage. Because muscle tissue, if you lose skeletal muscle, it can be rebuilt. Smooth muscle can come back, right? But there's just these things in our lives where if you run your body into the ground, it takes time to come back. So here's the other thing that I want to say about this is, besides like my own feelings about this and how I took care of myself with this, essentially, I mean, besides cooking healthy food, making sure everybody else was alive, I didn't have a lot of time for myself. I've said this before, but this past year has been one of the most stressful years that I've had in a really long time. And there was a lot of really good things that happened, but a lot of stuff where I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is what's coming up now? What? Right? And my husband kept saying things like, I would have never guessed this would have happened. I would have never thought this would have happened. And I said, babe, I know you never thought that this would have happened, but honestly, it's the only thing that would have stopped you from obsessively running like that. What you were doing was unhealthy, and it was getting worse and worse and worse, your obsession. You wouldn't listen to anybody else. And I told you not to go to this race. Like, you drove 2.5 hours to run a trail marathon after running a different marathon and being gone camping for a week. So you weren't rested. You weren't nutritionally prepped. And like, he had asked, oh, are you going to come with me? And I was like, no, I can't go. Like, there's other things with the kids, and I have work and I have stuff. And, I was like, you shouldn't go either. And I was like, I told you not to go. I told you not to go. It was not a good idea. No. Like, we have so many other things going on. And if he would just listen, I know. How many wives say that, right? If you would just listen to me, your life would be so much better and easier. All you would need to do is just listen to me, and then everything would be great, right? Right? Come on. But he did not. It's very frustrating. But we've talked a lot about like the feelings behind all of these things, but to really like understand the scope of what your actions, your actions have consequences. And even though you're like, yeah, I'm running or whatever, or like, yes, he doesn't drink, he doesn't gamble, he doesn't, chase other women or all these other things. But I'm like, he has these things where he will get obsessed about something and really dive into it. And if I can't rein him in or set a firm boundary around it, he will take it to the nth degree, to an unhealthy place. And that's really what happened with running. And again, it almost killed him. It almost killed him. And I still don't know the permanent damage that it may have done for him. So how did I stay healthy myself? I don't know. This is why recently I did a Dutch test and I revisited my own hormone levels and rechecked myself. That's really the best thing that I can do in that type of situation, right? I kept everything else going. I kept all the plates spinning. I kept my husband alive and turned him on a better path and got through it myself. I mean, at the same time too, like I recently hung out with some of my friends that I haven't seen in months, like 8 months, 9 months. And a lot of the times they'd reach out to me and they'd be like, oh, you want to do this? I'm like, I can't. I don't have time. I'm so sorry. I'm so busy. And we finally got to hang out and they were like, yeah, we miss you. And I was like, I know, I miss you guys too. Haven't seen you in a while. I've been trying to keep everybody alive, literally everybody alive. And now that I'm like, everything's grounded and I'm here and I'm back and I have to recalibrate myself and like really check in with myself. And now my own health becomes more of a priority, redoing my own hormone testing, redoing all of that, reevaluating what my levels are, and making sure my body can withstand what may come. That's really the big secret. Now, on the flip side of this, the other thing that I want to mention, because as I talk about this and mention, a lot of people will be in a situation where they are really stressed. And maybe you're thinking, I've never run ultramarathons, yet done them back to back. Why would I do that? That seems silly. I know. Okay, I know. But if you're somebody who's been in a very stressful job for the last 20 years and not had much of a break, and you haven't taken a sabbatical for a year, you haven't taken time away, you haven't given yourself a leave of absence, and you've been just in and out and doing the things, and you're feeling the stress in your body, it's the same thing. I want to tell you this. I mean, maybe not physically necessarily with like your muscle tissue breaking down that quickly, but it's like it happens in slower motion. Stress on the body is stress on the body. And whether or not you do it all in one shot or you take that stressful impact and you spread it out over the course of 10 years, your physical body is still going to have the impact of that stress and have to process, withstand it, and recover from it. And the recovery piece, that's the secret of it. You can have these stressful things happen as long as you have recovery. Recovery. If you're not giving your body an opportunity to recover, this is not just, oh, well, I took a half day and did some self-care and, took a bath. Great. That's not what we're talking about. You have to remove yourself from the stressful situations. You have to remove yourself from that negative impact. You have to shift and change your lifestyle, at least for a temporary period of time. You have to have other support. You have to have a different focus. And I say have to because that's how it happens. In order to get something different, you have to do something that you've never done. Some of the most common advice that I give women that I'm working with, that I'll give you for free right now. You don't have to pay to be on a phone consult with me. I will just tell you right now, if you are thinking about your work for the next day that you have work and you feel like this anxious feeling, take a break. Figure out something different. Set a plan in action to change something for yourself, because that work stress is still having the same negative impact on your life. That work stress is still going to cause those negative repercussions. You cannot out-supplement, right? I talk about this all the time, that my adrenal balance tincture, this is my most popular tincture, the most frequently reordered, again and again and again, used not just with women, but with their husbands and kids and things like that. All day, every day, adrenal balance tincture. I would love for everybody to be taking something like this. Yes, fantastic. But you know what? If you still walk into the fire every single day, I don't care if you douse a whole bottle on your head, that's not going to stop the stress response in your body. It takes effort from all these other areas. So a lot of times women will start by getting a Dutch test, understanding these are your real numbers, man. These are your numbers. Numbers don't lie. And you have to see it on the page to realize, oh crap. It is as bad as I thought. I was, okay. Yep. Okay. And here's what we do about it. We're going to make sure we're nourishing your body like this. We're going to make sure that you're not overdoing it with any of these other areas like exercise or things like that. We're going to make sure that you're getting the right supplements in to support those stress levels. And then eventually we'll start to talk about your lifestyle, right? There's a lot of women that I work with that once they start feeling better, functioning better, and they see the things shift in their environment in terms of like, boundaries with people, and this needs to change, that needs to change. Yes. But it can be difficult to really shift the dynamic of a relationship that you've had for a long time. And it can be difficult to shift work that you've had for a long time. I remember I worked with a gal, this was earlier this year, or almost a year ago. Brilliant woman. Brilliant. Just so sharp. And both her and her husband have very like high-powered jobs. And she'd worked in her company for 25 years. Something like that. And I was like, cool. She's like, yeah. And at one point when we were talking, and she was talking about the stress of work and all these other things and being on the team. And at one point I was like, she said she had this comment that just like floated out of her mouth. Like, I don't really need to work anymore. Like my husband makes a great living. He loves what he does and he's fine with working for another 10 years. And then we have enough then he's going to for sure retire. But she's like, I really don't need to work. And then she went on to talk about all these other things and her life and this and this. And I was like, well then, Susan, why don't you not work? Well, and I've been with this company and I should, and And I was like, listen, I understand all of these things. And if you really love what you do or whatever, then fine. I said, but I got to tell you, what we're trying to really work on and what we make progress and it gets completely derailed is everything with work. So she took a leave of absence for 2 months. We made the most progress, the fastest. In those 2 months, she went back to work and actually modified her schedule to go and work sort of part-time, right? It wasn't a full-time schedule, but wasn't quite part-time, but it was like really reduced hours. I mean, because if you're higher up in a company, it's not a 40-hour work week. It's like a 55, 60-hour work week. So I was like, let's get it down to 35 hours. How about that? Let's try and cut it almost in half, right? Which was still almost full-time, regular full-time job. But we did that and it changed everything. So her shifting her work hours like that and her travel availability changed everything. It's taking the leap. It's taking the leap and actually doing it. And once you do it and you start to notice the difference and you function better and you feel better and all those wonderful things, you never have to go back. Yeah. So that's my podcast on everything that has been going on. How my husband almost killed himself, almost died. I don't want to say almost killed himself. That almost gives it a bad context, right? That's not, he like literally almost ran himself to death. And he's still coming back from it. And it's been a lot. It's our new topic of discussion for therapy, for things. Because we still do therapy. And I firmly believe that couples should do therapy, especially if you've had a relationship and you work through a lot of major life events and things like that. It's always good to have a third party kind of, talk things through with you. So, yes. All right. So that's my update, everyone. That's my update. Thank you for being here. If you have more questions or want more details on stuff, I will share. I had mentioned something and I had on my social media, and I had a request to, hey, I want to know more about this. Tell more of the story of this. So here it is. All right. Otherwise, thank you for being here and tuning in as always. Like, I so appreciate you guys, and I love being able to share knowledge and information, and as well that you guys ask questions about like, hey, I want to know more about this. Oh my gosh, or how do you navigate this? Or also just to be an example of, hey, these things happen in life and no one's perfect, right? But there's ways to move through it, and there is a way to navigate around it. You don't have to be stuck where you are forever. So have a great rest of your day, and I will chat with you guys later. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. If you would like more information, just head on over to drbethwesty.com for all the show notes and information from today's episode. And if you're looking for more community, more support, you can find and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and I would love to see you there.